The More Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting live from the UK and across the world online, you're now listening to the UK's only live alternative late night talk show. And I'm Kevin Moore. For the next 3 hours, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On tonight's show, I'll be speaking to Dan Green, who is a British author, writer, broadcaster and researcher, specialising in synchronicity and the collective unconscious. Dan will join us to discuss his research into whether Mary Magdalene was murdered. And did the Catholic Church conspire to eradicate the Holy Bloodline from existence? Well, Dan Green, welcome to the show.
Hello, welcome to all you insomniacs in Cardiff. The eagle has landed.
Well, we actually will be broadcasting across Lincoln. No, you're not actually based in Lincoln, are you? Oh, are you?
I'm living in the shadow of Lincoln Cathedral, so yes, I am.
You are? Okay. Well, where the story takes place, the story that you've traced as well. So, well, we will, like I say, we will be broadcasting in Lincoln soon. So we'll get you back on for the syndication for that, so you can broadcast across Lincoln live. Yeah. But to begin with, I was just speaking to you off air there as well. Now, your pseudonym is Dan Green as an author. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, a lot of my work has picked up where Dan Brown left off, and because of Lincoln's association with the colour green, Robin Hood and stuff like that, and also the alchemist Fulcanelli, he coined the term green language, which was speaking of the secret codes in Gothic cathedrals. So when you put them all together, calling myself Dan Green seemed like a good idea.
Okay. Now, your work, Dan, very much based on the Da Vinci Code, is it not?
It picks up where certain elements of the Da Vinci Code kind of highlight aspects of the Jesus-Mary story. Now, that in itself, it wasn't a brand new story. That had picked up where Bage and Lee and Lincoln had left off in their book in 1982. And it's a theme that's never really gone away. So I've just kind of picked up the torch and took it a further extent than anybody, I think.
Okay. Could you just make sure that your face is near the microphone receiver as well, Dan?
Certainly.
That's it. You've just come through nice and clear there. Okay. Right. So you say it takes off. But had you been researching this prior to the Da Vinci Code movie coming out?
Well, yeah. I'd first got entangled with this episode as far back as 1985. So yes, it certainly predates Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. I'd actually laid it and put it down again and left it. I thought my involvement was probably concluded, but it reintroduced itself into my life shortly after Dan Brown's blockbuster rekindled the flame for a lot of people. Suddenly, it re-entered into my life as well in certain aspects and synchronicities, which we're going to talk about, I should say. Okay.
Well, first of all, then, tell us about your adventure in 1986 and how this sort of started for you as well.
Right. Rennes-le-Chateau was the mystery at the time. The Holy Blood, Holy Grail had came out. It was a million seller. Obviously, I was interested in that because I'm a kind of connoisseur of mysteries. And kind of what we call the paranormal. I prefer to use the term quantum entanglement. I think it's a bit more of a scientific term than it's possibly replaced paranormal. But I got a dream, and I got this date in a dream. It was keep introducing. It would not go away. It was April 24th. Kept burning it in my mind, and also the word Lacombe. And this was like 9 months before my intention to go to Rennes-le-Chateau to see what I might be able to discover. So obviously, April 24th, I thought, well, maybe that's a date that I should turn up there. This was like 9 months prior. Now, to give you the shorthand version, because it's quite a long story, we turned up at Rennes-le-Chateau on the 24th of April. And lo and behold, the first person that we came across was a fellow who'd left Bordeaux, and he'd got this yearning to go to Rennes-le-Chateau. And he'd built his own kind of property. It was very primitive, like a Navajo Indian stone hut. And he'd call it Lacombe, which is exactly the word that I got in a dream. So I thought, this is getting interesting. And again, cutting the long story short, we had quite an adventure over there. The most significant thing was that we came across a cave. Now, the interesting thing is that this cave was painted in one of Da Vinci's paintings, the one called Virgin on the Rocks. It's actually, if you were to stand there, as we stood there, he's painted it in the top right-hand corner of that famous painting of his, which is intriguing because although Da Vinci had ended his days in France, there's no evidence that he ever gone to Rennes-le-Chateau. But we'd found this cave. Now, in those days, everybody was searching for a cave or a tomb at Rennes-le-Chateau. They all thought it had something to do with Jesus or Mary Magdalene or relics or something like that. Now, there was 2 points of entry in this cave, but they were actually sealed by stone and rubble. There was a stone marker nearby, a babbling brook, and we thought, what can be the significance of this? I've had this strange dream, a date to be there, and we discover this cave which you can't enter. There was a niche where you could clearly see it was for votive purposes, where you might want to place flowers or something like that. But the fact it was actually in Da Vinci's painting was astounding. Now, if that wasn't enough for one day's adventure, at 8 o'clock that evening, when we were retiring in this primitive property of this fellow called Daniel and his Lacombe, all three of us saw 3 kind of stars in the sky in the horizon. It was 8 o'clock at night. It was April, so it was still quite light. So we watched these stars which suddenly appeared, and then they started moving. So we're all thinking, "Hey, what's going on here? This is really, really strange." Next thing we know, a red cloud, a real big red cloud had started heading our way. It was flashing lightning. There was no thunder or anything. And it sailed over our heads silently and headed off to the famous Rennes-le-Chateau itself, which was in the distance, circled around that and headed off. Now, this is what people refer to as a UFO. It clearly was an unidentified flying object. I'm not saying aliens and spaceships, not at all. But, why on earth I'd have a date, a name in a dream, and then we turn up on that date, find some cave that obviously had a significance, and then had this weird experience with this aerial phenomenon. It's quite a lot for one day activity. But we clearly met that encounter, whatever it was. I think the author Jenny Randles, who's wrote a lot about UFOs, has described similar things, and she's called it like a time storm. And she says that when people experience these things, they quite often synchronicity comes into their life, and surely enough, that's exactly what happened from that day on. Synchronicity seems to surround me and follow me and never be a great distance away.
Okay. Well, we'll get more into that synchronicity as well.
Yes.
But why the Le Chateau? Why that particular area? Just remind us about that as well.
Well, the story became global in the late 70s, where a parish priest called Brenda Sonnier, he'd discovered some secret, and almost overnight became ridiculously wealthy, as if he was bribing, perhaps even the Vatican. This is what people suspect. He was just a a poorly paid parish priest who clearly stumbled across some secret in the vicinity, which was going to rewrite perhaps religious texts or something like that. This became the kernel of the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery, and it seemed to be tied up somewhere with Jesus and unorthodox versions of the Jesus story, which we now have all heard a little bit more about via Dan Brown and other sources. That perhaps
Yes.
Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. There was a child, a bloodline. So everybody seemed to be in the area seeking clues that might lead them somewhere, because Sonia had built this strange little church dedicated to Mary Magdalene, and there was all sorts of bizarre anomalies in there.
And who was Sonia, Dan?
He was the local parish priest at Rennes-le-Chateau.
Right.
We're talking
Right.
about 1885.
This is the chap, yeah, and this is the chap that we're talking about that was bribed.
Well, he seemed to have, having discovered some sort of secret, nobody disputes that whatever the secret was, the reality of it, he was in a position to bribe people, perhaps, we say maybe
Yes.
the Vatican. He was clearly made a wealthy person because of what he had discovered.
And what do you think he discovered?
Well, people still argue about that today. It seems to be one and the same with the secret that was guarded by the Knights Templar. They discovered something in Jerusalem when they went over there, and people argue over what was the nature of what they discovered, but Sonia seemed to have discovered the same thing, or had heard about it, or had evidence to show exactly what the Templars were guarding. And again, we all agree, it seems to be some alternative version concerning Jesus and history as it is written.
Okay, so let's go back to your synchronicity then. How did you go from the Le Chateau to Lincoln Cathedral? What did you find next on your journey in 1986?
As I say, when I'd done the Rennes-le-Chateau visit and had such amazing experiences, you could only kind of chronicle and journal it and think, well, this is what happened, what to make of it, I don't really know. And I was quite prepared to have left it there. So I came away from Rennes-le-Chateau and didn't have much interest in returning. I'd kind of done my bit, I suppose, because of the dream. I'd met my obligation, if you like. But I couldn't help but notice that the parallels with Rennes-le-Chateau and Lincoln Cathedral were quite obvious. For example, that Rennes-le-Chateau is high up a hill. At the top of the hill, there's a church dedicated to Mary Magdalene. And when you go in the church, there's a statue of a devil. Now, back over in England at Lincoln Cathedral, which is high up a hill, it originally had a church dedicated to Mary Magdalene at the top, which was demolished to make way for the Lincoln Cathedral itself. And if you go in Lincoln Cathedral today, there's a statue of a devil yet again. So this always resonated with me. I thought there seems to be a clear parallel between Rennes-le-Chateau and Lincoln Cathedral. Now, I'd left that alone, but strange kind of circumstances drew me to Lincoln. 3 times in my life. I'd been drawn there in 1979. That was before I'd gone to France and Rennes-le-Chateau. I was drawn back in 1989 and returned back up north. And then in 1998, circumstances again kind of just assembled themselves, and I was back in Lincoln. And this time I stayed. And then 6-7 years later, the whole thing's re-entered into my life, and I've discovered what we can clearly show is a Lincoln Cathedral Code, which, when we take a close look at it and decode it, actually decodes parchments that were found by Berenger Sonia at Rennes-le-Chateau and might well hold the key to the mystery. So I'd effectively fetched it, perhaps by being a player in this drama. I'd brought it over from France and announced it as terminating in England, Lincoln.
Okay, but there must be some sort of direct correlation between Lincoln City Cathedral and your work. I mean, the Knights Templar, they were seized there, well, arrested there, were they not, or taken there once they were arrested to the cathedral, were they? To Lincoln. Yeah,
not so many miles away. 12 miles away was, and it's still there now. The remains of a Templar preceptory. The Templars were really quite proliferate throughout Lincolnshire. At the same time, there was a strong Jewish community, second only to London. But when the Templars were kind of charged with heresy, they were clearly set up, everybody knows this. They were arrested at this temple brewer, 12 miles away from Lincoln, and put into Lincoln Castle, which is only a stone's throw from the cathedral. And if you go there now, you'll see some amazing graffiti that's still, it's the best in Europe, just about, Templar graffiti in the prison, in the castle, where they were tried in the chapter house in Lincoln Cathedral, and that's incidentally where Hollywood filmed their own Da Vinci Code, when, surprisingly, or synchronicity, if you like, Hollywood decided to come and film scenes for the Da Vinci Code in Lincoln Cathedral.
That's
at the
right.
same time when I was working on, an authentic Lincoln Cathedral code. Now, you couldn't make that up.
No, you couldn't. The synchronicity in that. Well, Dan, we've just got to take a short break here. But after the break, the phone lines will be open for you to speak to Dan Green or share your opinion. You can call us on 0292 0003666 or text your comments and questions to 07728 758 759. International listeners outside the UK may Skype the show by adding The More Show Live, or you can interact with us on Facebook and Twitter.
The More Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. Broadcasting from the studios of Radio Cardiff, you're now watching The More Show.
Welcome back. I'm currently joined by British author, writer, broadcaster Dan Green. Dan Green, welcome back to the show.
Now then.
Now, Dan, I used to live in Lincoln back at, when was it now? 5 years ago.
All right.
I used to live down a place called Burton Walters.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And there's a Chedworth estate there. I've got people that know Lincoln will know these places. And I was always fascinated by Lincoln Cathedral as well. I mean, it's such a crowd puller for tourism as well. But what you've put together here seems it's quite an incredible amount of information to sort of digest. And you have got a movie, haven't you, as well?
Yeah, about 3 years ago I was approached by a company in America, and I was quite freed up to have a lot of artistic control in it, so I kind of directed what became the grisly title, The Murder of Mary Magdalene, Genocide of the Holy Bloodline. How dramatic does that sound? And that is now actually in full on YouTube under the title The Murder of Mary Magdalene Free Movie. The entire movie's there if people want to get some popcorn in and give EastEnders a miss. They're free to watch that.
Okay.
The book that's recently came out, Kevin's taken things even further though than the movie, kind of where the movie ended. The book's picked up the baton and taken things even more dramatically further.
Okay. And what's your book title called?
Well, what the content of the movie is also in the book, so it's pretty much a similar title. The title is The Murder of Mary Magdalene, Synchronicity and the Scarlet Saints. That's the subtitle.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get straight into it then. Just before the ad break there, we were talking about the Knights Templar. Just remind the audience again who they were and what they did as well.
Well, they were holy crusaders. They were like warrior monks, they're recorded as in history. And they went to ensure that pilgrims going to Jerusalem were going to have a safe passage, but they kind of stationed themselves over there. And after 9 years under the holy Temple Mound in Jerusalem, they'd been looking for something, and they finally had found something which to this day people argue over. It seems to be one and the same thing as what Sonia discovered and what I've kind of brought over to Lincoln, the ultimate secret that the Templars were guarding. They got ever so wealthy, and there was a lot of jealousy about them. And because of them becoming too wealthy in the fullness of time, King Philip at the time had enough of them. He'd asked if he could join them, and he was refused. So that was the final death knell for them, really. And they had all these charges trumped up against them and heresies, and they were kind of arrested. And as a military order, they were disbanded, you know. But that wasn't the end of the story. They kind of wandered off to different places. And it looks like what we call Freemasonry became a new version of the Knights Templar, and all the secrets that they were guarding and the mysteries that had once been Knights Templar became modern-day Freemasonry. And lots of the clues that are in Gothic cathedrals, and particularly Lincoln Cathedral, clearly have been put there by the handiwork of the Freemasons. Only they could have done it, you know, from the Lincoln imp, the statue that's in the cathedral, and many other anomalies and things that you wouldn't expect to find. Like what started it for me was in 2005, a glazier was going up a ladder to clean some windows at the Great East Window in Lincoln Cathedral, and at the scene of the Last Supper, on Christ's plate, there is a dog, which you would not expect to find. That is clearly an anomaly. That is clearly something that you might want to read in a Dan Brown book. What is a dog doing on the plate at the scene of the Last Supper? Now, this dog reappears not once, but 3 times concerning Lincoln Cathedral. You see it again on a woodcut in the nave, where Christ is on the way to Calvary, and this dog is kind of looking up at him again. And then outside in the cathedral, the statue of the famous poet Tennyson, who actually wrote the Holy Grail. That's one of the greatest poems about the Holy Grail ever written. His statue has him accompanied by a dog also. So this dog symbology kept creeping in, and people say to me, well, what are we to make of that? Well, the fact of the matter there is that Freemasons, every Freemasonic lodge, has a star in there, and it's referred to as the blazing star, and it's commonly known that this is the star in the heavens, Sirius, which is the dog star. So clearly, there's indications in the cathedral by these dog symbologies that Freemasons have been at work, and not just for a laugh or something like that, for novelty. They are clearly wanting to tell us things. So I thought, well, I wonder if there are any more anomalies in the cathedral, and I found many, many of them, and they all interlock.
Okay, but what's the cathedral's point of view on these anomalies then? I mean, what do they say? Do they have no opinion on them at all?
They don't have a real kind of strong, you know, how many times, Kevin, can you say, oh okay, well, you know, a bored Freemason centuries ago must have done that to be mischievous or have a laugh, you know? How many times can you say that and think that's a great excuse? Because alternatively, when you look at it, how I've laid it out, all these clues kind of pass the parcel in a paper chase to each other and lead, as one would expect in the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery, lead to a final location which just happens to be opposite the southeast corner of Lincoln Cathedral. So what we're looking at inside the cathedral, very much like Sonia laid out clues in his church in France, is a join-the-dot paper chase that does lead to a concluding resting place. And it looks like we found it.
Okay, and where is the resting place? Or should we actually ask you about some other anomalies that led you to the resting place to begin with? I mean, what were some of the key... what anomalies first led you to this resting place that we haven't included so far?
Well, there's quite a few confirmations. One has to take a read of the parchment that was found in the church at Rennes-le-Chateau by the parish priest Sonia, which nobody has successfully decoded, but it decodes step by step at Lincoln Cathedral. When you read the parchment, it just sounds like kind of gobbledygook. I'll quickly read it to you, and it won't make much sense, but it reads, "Shepherd dares no temptation. that Poussard 10 years hold the key, piece 681, by the cross and this horse of God, I complete this demon guardian at midday, blue apples. Now, we haven't the time to go into that step by step, but one of the more impressive ones is that when we look at midday blue apples, it's a phenomenon within the cathedral that occurs on the 22nd of July at midday. Now, this sounds like something out of an Indiana Jones movie, but you have to bear in mind where their writers get their creative ideas from. They take a look at things like this and copy them in the movies. So at 12 o'clock on the 22nd of July, which is the Feast of Mary Magdalene, okay, if it's a sunny day, the sun shines through a specific glass pane down at the southeast corner of the cathedral, and that provides an optical effect which lands on the stone floor, and lo and behold, you see a representation of red apples and blue apples, which is part of the parchment's cipher when it refers to midday blue apples. That's a real fascinating one. Now, the precision that has gone into that can only suggest that the cathedral had been built to what people now refer to as sacred geometry.
Okay, and there's other evidence to go with that as well, isn't there? Because there's
yes, the bit that I'll read it again, where it says by the cross and this horse of God. Now, if you go to the angel choir within the cathedral, to the choristers, there's lots of little wooden seats that you can't always access, but where the subdean sits, if one were to lift it up, and nobody would know this because they wouldn't be nosing in such a fashion, but once you know that there's something there, if you go and have a look, there's a 13th, 14th century carving there, and it's a knight falling off a horse, and the horse's legs are crossed as it falls. Now, again, in true Dan Brown fashion, which has become now Dan Green, the fastenings on the horse happen to have 7 on one side and 4 on another. Now, this is pure Freemasonry that I'm explaining here, Kevin. This is how it works. This is how they do the ciphers. So you've got 7 fastenings on one side of the horse, 4 on the other, and its legs are crossed to provide the multiplication sign that we used to use in school. So if you multiply 7 by 4, that gives you the number 28. Now, the amount of times ciphers are decoded like this within this code, Lincoln Cathedral Code, 4 or 5 times this happens, and it brings us to number 28. Now, if we go to the southeast end corner of the cathedral, just across the way, there's a burial ground with 56 tombs, and our code, all the clues lead precisely to tomb number 28.
Okay, and the importance of that is?
Well, this seems to be, as I say, this has all been deduced from the Rennes-le-Chateau parchments, the big secret of whatever Rennes-le-Chateau was about, the big secret that Sonia was guarding, the secret that it seems the Knight Templars were guarding, and let's not forget they were only 12 miles away in Lincoln. Whatever this great secret is that has been kept hidden throughout history, and something to do, we believe, or what people loosely refer to as a treasure, for those that are treasure hunters, something to do with an unorthodox version, or if you like, the truth, perhaps, of the historical Jesus story and any possible liaison with Mary Magdalene. There's something of some kind of historical or religious value buried under the ground there, opposite the southeast corner of Lincoln Cathedral.
Okay, and have you had chance to do any sort of, I don't know, any sort of detections? Have you any sort of equipment that you've been able to put over the ground and sort of?
Well, what happened was, like, when I'd announced this work and shared it with everybody, this is what I've done. I've done all the hard work, and I've shared it with people, you know. And as I say, the code concludes at tomb 28, opposite the southeast corner. Now, I could have just left it at that because we're talking about something at a depth under the ground. Now, it's a burial ground, you know, which makes it very difficult under any circumstances to think about digging. It just couldn't happen as the situation stands. So I approached the cathedral, who were obviously aware of my work. It had a lot of local and national press on the internet and still does. And I said, well, you know, can we have a ground-penetrating a GPR scan here, that will show us if there's anything under the ground where my code is saying there appears to be. Now, I said to the cathedral, I'm willing to pay for this myself. There's no structural damage. It's a simple procedure. So can I have permission to do that? Because I couldn't approach a company to do it without cathedral's permission. So they publicly said at the time, Kevin, and it was in the press, they said, well, you're paying for it, no structural damage. We'll give you the permission to do it. So I sought out a company, one of the top companies in the land, who found tombs at Westminster, and they were happy to do it. But as the time got nearer in the following spring to do this GPR scan to see if we could locate anything under the ground, the cathedral kind of strangely changed their mind and said, no, you can't have permission, and went very silent on the matter.
Okay, and but you did get a chance to do this, did you not? I mean, you had a chance.
Well, yes. Now, April the 16th, 2 years ago. Now, because I'd made the location public, I'm not one of these people who said, I've found out where there might be something of immense importance, and I'm not going to tell you. Because of my books and movie and press and such, the location was like in the public domain. Anybody can come into Lincoln, can go and stand there tomorrow. Now, because of this, other Rennes-le-Chateau fanatics or researchers or treasure hunters obviously were interested in what I was saying. And two of them who wished to remain anonymous, even to this day, one was a researcher, the other was a fellow from Hamburg in Germany, a geophysicist. They actually went to the location themselves and just got on with it using the most sophisticated equipment. I believe they did it one Saturday afternoon without permission from the cathedral, and they forwarded the results to me, which was kind of them. All they asked in return was that I did not disclose their identities. Having said that, I wouldn't have known them too well anyway. And lo and behold, exactly where my code has stated, you can see on the GPR scan a sarcophagus-shaped object, and to the right of that seems to be a smaller oblong metal box. Now, what are the odds of that?
Indeed. I mean, whose unmarked grave is that, I wonder?
Well, there used to be a church there which was demolished in 1781. There's no evidence of the church now. It was demolished finally in 1781. And coincidentally, or with synchronicity, I prefer to say, in 1781, a noblewoman in France, a lady called Marie de Negre, who we all believe knew the secret of Rennes-le-Chateau, she died in the same year. So it's like the secret died with her at the same time that this church was demolished opposite Lincoln Cathedral. So all traces of the secret seem to just die out in 1781. Now, whereas there's no church there now, exactly where my code has terminated and exactly where this unofficial scan was done would be where the crypt under the ground of the church would be. The church isn't there anymore, but the crypt is still under the ground. No, so whatever there is seems to be, had been stashed away in that crypt.
Okay, I mean, you do say that Lincoln Cathedral is a sort of battleground between light and dark as well. I mean, just
that's very dramatic. And you know what, Kevin? I did not come up with that. Now, in 1995, get this, in 1995, the dean of the cathedral at the time, a fellow called Brandon Jackson, declared Lincoln Cathedral to be a battleground of light and dark, and he actually wanted it closing for 3 months to have it exorcised. How bizarre is that? So the Sunday Times were quick to come and interview him, and they did a massive feature on it. And the Sunday Times isn't a silly newspaper, It's a very respectable newspaper. And they spoke to other members of the Church of England who wanted to remain anonymous, and one of them in particular said that he'd found that Lincoln Cathedral was the most evil place he'd ever been to. So what is going on? There's clearly something going on long before I turned up on the scene. Is it to do with some secret that somehow down the line has been kept away from anybody and everybody concerning Lincoln Cathedral and some nearby secret, such as the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery.
Well, that's it, isn't it? So after the break, we'll get into the sort of the other parts of your work, which will get more into just what are the implications of your work as well. So stay tuned. We're going to take a short break now, and we'll be right back after this.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The Moore Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. Broadcasting from the studios of Radio Cardiff, you're now watching The Moore Show.
Welcome back to the show. I'm still currently joined with writer, broadcaster and researcher Dan Green. Dan, welcome back.
Now that I'm still here, sir.
Now, Dan, with this whole quest that you've been on to find the truth as well, and we've only touched upon the very basics here of your research as well. I mean, what about the Holy Grail? I mean, is that not what a lot of these Mary Magdalene blood researchers, are looking for in a sense?
Absolutely. The term Holy Grail is rightly or wrongly synonymous with the Mary Magdalene figure. It started life centuries ago as a cup, but now it's, as Dan Brown pointed out in his book and movie, it seems to be the fact that Jesus and Mary were married and had a child, and the bloodline came from that. And that the child and the bloodline is more or less the Holy Grail, or Mary Magdalene herself was the Holy Grail. Now, this was picking up a lot of impetus, and I thought that my work was just going to consolidate this, but bring you to a location where something related to it might be discovered, scrolls, documents, or whatever, to back that up. But the twists and turns in my own discoveries have led me to believe that this is not so, that there was not a marriage and a child, because unfortunately Mary Magdalene was murdered.
So you don't believe there was any baby, there was any bloodline that's passed on? You think that when Magdalene died, that was it? There was no
That's
next
right.
generation.
I think the truth of the matter is relating to the mysterious figure of Mary Magdalene, and even I think biblical scholars will concede that she is a very mysterious figure. So whatever's awaiting us by way of discovery at Tomb 28 is perhaps documentation of this mysterious figure, Mary Magdalene, who for some of my latter work and the very last twist in the tale is kind of brings into question the very identity of Jesus even.
Well, that's right. So, okay, so you don't think there was any sort of bloodline that existed or exists even now? I mean, that's going to upset a few people, is it not, Dan?
It has. It's upset an apple cart, and in an industry more or less that's been spawning on the bloodline theory, whether people genuinely believe it or not. But I think the fact that my work, and we can follow it in the movie and we follow it in the book. Lots of evidence going back to Da Vinci's Last Supper painting, where there's a disembodied hand wielding a knife, and there's a threatening Peter next to Mary making a threatening gesture across her throat. I found a document at a place called Wyville, which is close to Grantham. Synchronicity brought that to me, and it's a search for Wyville itself, which is ridiculous because Wyville's a small village, and there's this mysterious document that the library have had ever since the year dot. They can't remember who put it there, but it's a bit of a prized possession of theirs. It's dated 1917, which is the year that Berenger Saunier died. And there's illustrations in it as well. There's about 30 pages. Nobody's sure of who the author was. But if you follow it, it takes you exactly to the southeast corner of Lincoln. But the first illustration on it is a dagger. Now, if you view Lincoln Cathedral from the air, it's in the shape of the original Templar symbol of the Cross of Lorraine, which is known as the double cross and also the double dagger. So again, we're getting clues from the geometry and the architecture of Lincoln Cathedral. and this dagger comes into the equation. So I started studying paintings of Mary Magdalene, and lo and behold, I started finding quite a lot that clearly showed an incision in her left-hand side. It quite often started turning up in paintings. Well, you'd never notice it because you wouldn't be looking for it, in the same way that people studied Da Vinci's Last Supper for centuries without realizing that the figure next to Jesus looked very much like a woman, and lots of people will say yes because it's Mary Magdalene. So that put me on the trail of discovering that the Magdalene figure had been demised by a dagger, and this had been kept a secret by many painters throughout the centuries. Obviously, they couldn't come out with it and just say it. They've been persecuted themselves, but this seemed to be the secret that the Templars had been guarding. And as I say, if we were to access the location that I've announced, there could well be documentation or evidence or even sarcophagi there. Don't forget, we have got an outline of one from that unofficial GPR scan.
Yes, that's right, and we've put the pictures up on the screen just earlier on, just to show people the results of that.
In the paintings, it was the same area. It was the left abdomen. Time and time again, you could see what was clearly, when you understood it to be scar tissue, which you would never have noticed otherwise, because, as I say, you weren't looking for it. It's only when you have this knowledge in front of you, you can do your own Poirot detective work, and it turns up many, many times. And like I say, with the cathedral viewed from the air, built in a specific fashion, the cross of Lorraine is the double dagger, the double cross. And of course, we're familiar with the familiar Jesus story, which was the double cross of Judas. And strangely enough, his name Iscariot comes from some Jewish rebels called the Sicarii, known as the dagger people.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, do you think you've brought unwanted attention as well through doing your work?
Obviously, if this has been kept, secret or preferred not known throughout centuries, the people belonging to that way of thinking would still prefer it to be kept secret. It's, but for me, if I discover these things and can show them clearly to other people, if people have been told a lie throughout centuries, maybe for the church to have their own power, where is the harm in exposing a lie? There can be no kind of what's the shame in presenting liable truth to people, or at least giving them an opportunity to think, well, this sounds quite reasonable. I can see what's being shown here. It looks, it's not far-fetched even. It's quite reasonable, quite sensible. If the church had been lying centuries ago, and they don't seem to be winning at the moment.
Well,
the popularity in the church.
Dan, that leads me on to my next question. I mean, why did the church initially cover this up? This goes back to, you think,
If there'd been
who murdered her? Do you think?
If there'd been a very successful female figure who had a lot of supporters, and men, perhaps misogynists, didn't like the idea of a popularity of a female woman, and she was kind of removed from the picture, and they replaced her with a storyline which kind of bigged up a male figure instead, and this male figure, became the biblical Jesus, because, in Greek and Roman, there's no records that the biblical figure Jesus as presented ever existed. There's just nothing there, really. There's nothing there. There's no evidence other than the biblical text itself, which was written centuries after the events and written by the church, that this male figure was there. So maybe, what if it had originally been a female who had been removed, and then the whole issue had been restyled to give it male adoration, maybe, shall we say, to keep it kind of in that sense, because throughout history, Kevin, going back to the first ever mathematician, the Greek Hypatia, who was a lady, and Jeanne of Arc, some say even Marilyn Monroe, some say Diana Spencer, Benazir Bhutto, all extremely controversial female figures that have challenged the authority of the day, have been removed. Could this not have happened centuries ago with this mysterious figure that is handed down to us as the name Mary Magdalene?
It's possible, isn't it? I mean, none of us were alive at that time to know any, to know the truth except for what was documented, and
this is it. We all have access to computers and laptops now, and we can actually sit down and do our own sensible detective work leisurely in our own time. And when you do that, rather than accept what the church told you to think centuries ago, you might be surprised what you can find.
Absolutely. And, just when you thought there was nothing else to discover, in a sense, are you still discovering, new facts and
yes,
is there more?
I've kind of like been pushed through the hoop. Synchronicities keep coming my way, and I continue to share stuff as it comes my way. It's like writing the book was very difficult because it was like I could never finish it. There was more and more stuff coming. I think, well, I've got to put a final page to it, but there's still more stuff coming and information. Which clearly puts the focus of attention on Mary Magdalene, and also, as I say, the very identity of the Jesus figure might now be brought into question, which is quite a bombshell.
Yeah. And how many? I mean, okay, so you've done the book, but I mean, you're based in Lincoln. How many times do you go see the Lincoln Cathedral still? Is it still as a sort of attractive nowadays for you to visit, or?
Well, you get people, because of my work, Kevin, you get people who come on like Grail tours and stuff like that. They start in France to go to Glastonbury, but they're now coming to Lincoln. And because I live nearby, and because I've kind of brought this about, if I'm available, I'll come and I'll show these people around, free of charge as well, by the way. It can take 3 hours. I still get lots of people who visit because of my work. And because the Tomb 28 is well known and people can go to it, and if they wish to believe the content of what I've said, it's quite a deep spiritual thing for them. Quite often on the 22nd of July, the Feast of Mary Magdalene, I've gone past there because I live nearby, and people have put bouquets of roses, and people come and place things there. There's people came from all over the world. I mean, quite often they get in touch with me by email, so I know that for a fact.
Okay, well, the 22nd of July is my birthday, so...
Really? What a synchronicity, then.
There's a synchronicity.
That is a synchronicity, yeah. I could not have known that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's strange. Okay, so, you don't have a website, do you, as such?
I don't know, really, because, as you might imagine, the amount of people that would come my way wanting contact, I couldn't possibly deal with everybody, so I've not really invited that my way. I need the time and space to get on with my work myself, so I've not actually put a website up. There's lots of YouTube clips, and I refer people back to the free movie, what is now the free movie on YouTube. I'll give you the title again, Kevin. It's The Murder of Mary Magdalene, free movie you will find on YouTube.
Okay.
Well, I direct everybody to that.
No, we'll link the page up for this interview to that YouTube movie as well. And, I mean, what do you think will be the conclusion to all this, in your opinion?
I even got a fellow involved. He's a mathematician and an astronomer. I'd literally turned over every stone in this search, and I thought, well, maybe I'll look at the heavens now. And you may have heard how in the past, people have sold books and they've said, oh, the pyramids of Egypt, the stars in the heavens that seem to... the positions on the earth seem to duplicate the stars in the heavens, like Orion seems to reflect the Egyptian pyramids. So I got in touch with this fellow who's an astronomer and a mathematician. I'm not a mathematician by any imagination. And he kind of came over and he orientated and aligned Lincoln Cathedral with these maths, and then he went away back to his computer and his star charts. And lo and behold, he came back with me and he said, yes, there's a connection in the heavens with Lincoln Cathedral, and it happens to be the star Arcturus, which is amazing because that's where the Arthurian legend emanates from, and where even the name Arthur itself came from. So I've even kind of looked upwards for clues and information. I've just about expired everything, and nothing ever budges from the final location. So I'm unsure that I can possibly do any more other than perhaps keep pushing for an official GPR scan. And I'm just going to sit back and put my feet up and see what happens, because I think circumstances out of my control might actually provide opportunities. 2 weeks ago in Lincoln Castle, the archaeologists were completely freaked out. They'd discovered a 1,000-year-old church with skeletons in it under Lincoln Castle, which they had no idea was there. And they're now saying that the skeletons are laid out in such a fashion that it clearly indicates they were high profile, and there could be a holy relic involved. They're having the skeleton's DNA'd at the moment. So these discoveries, and that's not the first one that's happened in the area. There's another one happened at the time the Da Vinci Code were visiting Lincoln. The tomb of the unknown woman was discovered, and that was fascinating because how could a tomb have just been discovered and not known to be there?
That's right.
You need a lot of permission to be buried in such a hallowed ground, you know.
That's right.
How could there be no records of that?
Okay, well, Dan Green, we've got to leave it there. If you just stay on the line, and in this break, I'm just going to speak to you off air.
Okay.
So, Dan Green, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening to me, everybody.
Stay tuned, as after the break I'll be joined by Brian Forrester, whose area of interest is in the study of the Inca culture and has led to the writing many books on the Incas, including a brief history of the Incas, so stay tuned.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.